Well, I was about to go to bed last night and I got a notification on my phone from the MLB app. And I thought, okay, we'll check it again. It's probably not the news that I wanted to hear. And although that was kind of the case, it was about Framber Valdez and how he decided he was going to sign a 3-year, $115 million deal with the Detroit Tigers, which is kind of weird because they're giving him 38 million a year, but don't want to pay Tariq Skubal 32 million coming off back-to-back Cy Young awards for a guy that's never won a Cy Young award before. I don't know. I'm not saying Framber Valdez isn't worth that. I'm just saying it's weird that the guy that you know is your ace and could be your ace of the future if you just sign him to an extension, you offered him half of what you ended up getting Framber Valdez for. It's weird, but that's a solid 1-2 punch there for the Tigers, at least heading into this season. And having been tied to the Orioles for most of the offseason, the Orioles don't get Suarez, they don't get Valdez. It seems like we were more in on Suarez than Valdez because from what I've heard, we actually offered Suarez a contract 4 for 120 before he took the deal with the Red Sox. Whereas with Valdez, I don't necessarily know the full extent as to what offers the Orioles put out there or if they were close at any point in time in getting him. It was just a weird thing where somehow, some way, I thought maybe this is going to happen. He's going to be an Oriole, but then part of me was like, but why do I have a feeling that someone's going to jump and just for whatever reason sign him? Because I don't know, because it was Orioles and Mets, and then it was Orioles and Blue Jays, and oh, the Yankees have checked in, the Giants have checked in, the Braves have checked in. Nothing about the Tigers until this very minute when he signed with the team. Now, there's still options out there for the Orioles as we approach 6 days until pitchers and catchers report for spring training. And when you look at the Orioles rotation this season, currently, right now, as opposed to last year, it's definitely better. The addition of Shane Baz was nice. You're most likely, hopefully, going to get Kyle Bradish for a full season for the first time since 2023. Trevor Rogers, I understand, is not going to have a sub-2 ERA throughout a full season, but I still have a feeling if he can keep it in the high twos to low threes or even mid threes, that it would still be a pretty solid success. And I get people are very torn on Dean Kramer, but he's been our most reliable starter since 2022. Like he just goes out there and he does its job. It's not the sexiest of stats, but he does his thing and he's a number 4, number 5 starter. So his numbers, it's not that his numbers don't matter. It's just that his numbers would say he's a number 4, number 5 guy, and that's where the Orioles have him. I don't think he's been anywhere more higher than third in the rotation, which is where he was last year because of the injuries that we had. Because people are still wondering why we got rid of Grayson Rodriguez. And I said before, he's an often injured pitcher who hasn't pitched in a year and a half, and we don't really know what we're going to get out of him because people, talked about it and they're like, well, Shane Baz, he just had his first full season coming off injury, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. But he's, I think, I want to say he's around the same age or at least a little younger than Rodriguez. And plus, to me, I don't really know, but at this point in time, Rodriguez has not shown ace stuff even when he was healthy. He's been good, but not ace stuff. Boz has that potential to be an ace, maybe even going into next year, depending on what it looks like for the Orioles going forward. Zach Eflin was also re signed along with Albert Suarez on a minors deal. And Eflin is probably going to start the season on the injured list because he's still recovering from that injury last year, but a 1-year, $10 million deal, that's not going to kill the Orioles this year when it comes to that. And I think what happened with Eflin last year, the 5.93 ERA and whatever, had a lot to do with the injury. So I think he can get back to somewhat of his 2023 form with the Rays, or even, post Ray 2024 when we traded for him and he was, a really good starter down the stretch with Corbin Burns. But yeah, it's a weird situation, and I understand what we were expecting, and it's just kind of like, there's still options out there, and I would be okay with them. There's some that and I'll get to those, that I would be like, it's probably not worth it, but we're kind of going to go through the options that the Orioles have and just kind of see where I would, go with the Orioles if they decided to make some moves as the MLB app pops up. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. We got Blaze Alexander from the Diamondbacks for Cade Stroud. That's okay. So there's that. That just happened. That's breaking Orioles news for those that are just tuning in. We got infielder Blaze Alexander from the Diamondbacks. So we do make a trade and we give up Cade Stroud, which is weird because didn't he pitch well or was that the other guy? I think it was. No, it wasn't Stroud, was it? I can't remember. But either way, some Orioles options that are out there right now. I think the big obvious one, and we've heard the Orioles, if they missed out on Framber Valdez, are really heavily invested in Zach Gallen. And that one's interesting to me because I know people are going to look at what he did last year. He lost 15 games, had a 4.83 ERA, gave up home runs. But when you look at how he finished the season, he looked a lot more like himself from the past. I mean, this is a guy with an ERA in his career of, I think, 3.58. He's received Cy Young votes before. He's been an all-star. And I think he could definitely fit in as the number 2 guy. I still don't think he would come in and be the Orioles ace. I still think at this point it's going to be Bradish or Rogers. I know people say, well, Rogers, why? But Rogers did what he did last year, so there's an opportunity he could pitch opening day for the Orioles. But Bradish might be the more logical option. But, Gallen also has that opening day ace experience, so I wouldn't be shocked if he was to sign with us, if he was the starter on opening day. Then there's a couple of other guys on here that I feel like could, definitely help here. I know the Orioles have shown interest in Lucas Giolito, who is 30 years old, and although missed all of 2024, when he pitched last year with the Red Sox, he was pretty good. He was 10-4 with a 3.41 ERA in 26 starts. He did miss, the playoffs last year because of an injury that he sustained, but he has said that he is 100% so ready to go, and we have heard the Orioles have interest. So to me, Gallen and Giolito would be the 2 free agents I would say look out for the Orioles to definitely sign. There's 2 older guys on here that I can see the Orioles kind of falling back to potentially. Well, 3 technically, because I've talked about Justin Verlander. However, he's 43, and although he pitched well in the second half of last year, it's just like I'm tired of getting pitchers who are 39, 40 years old. We need to move on from that. And Chris Bassett and Nick Martinez would be kind of like my fallback to the fallback of, okay, if you can't get a deal done with Gallen or he goes elsewhere and, Giolito, that falls through somehow, these guys can go out here. Now, Martinez is weird because he had a 5.5 WAR last year, which I did not know Nick Martinez had that high of a WAR. He's only behind Ranger Suarez, Framber Valdez, and Dylan Cease. So basically, by WAR, Nick Martinez is the fourth best pitcher on the free agent market according to WAR. He would come in at a 1 or 2 year deal. Bassett would probably be the same, and he pitched to a 3.96 ERA in 170 innings. Obviously helping Toronto get to the World Series. He's still been very effective. So those options there are on the table for the Orioles. There's some other intriguing names, but again, these would be more like low tier. Like, I don't see the Orioles doing this, but it would definitely, wouldn't surprise me. Zach Littell, another one who's only 30 years old. He did kind of struggle toward the end of the year with the Reds last year, but nonetheless, he's pitched in, I think, a good bit of games, has a 3.65 ERA in the last 2 years. So I wouldn't be opposed to that either. My problem is he's a fly ball pitcher, and at Camden Yards, that's not necessarily something you want to be here. There's also Nestor Cortez, which I don't really remember how well he did with the Brewers last year. I know he got hit hard in that 9-homer game against the Yankees early in that season. But yeah, he's still out there, along with Jose Quintana, who's 37, but last year with, I think it was the Mets, still pitched pretty well. Actually, it was the Brewers. Yeah, he was with the Brewers last year, pitched pretty well. So I can see that. And then, of course, there's other guys like Aaron Savali, Chris Paddock, Tyler Anderson, John Gray, guys that can definitely come out there and make something happen. But if I'm the Orioles free agency wise, I would stick with looking at Zach Gallen, Lucas Giolito, and Chris Bassett, and potentially Justin Verlander, which then takes us to the trade market. Because as we all know, which we've been saying for a while, the Orioles have a log jam at first base. And although that seems like a bad thing, it usually isn't, because that just means you can use one of them as a trade chip. And a lot of people are saying that Ryan Mountcastle could definitely be that guy that gets traded for a starting pitcher. And there's definitely some guys out there. I know Sandy Alcantara for the Marlins. Is there a chance that they would take that? Because they kind of need a first baseman right now, too. And then there is the possibility, now that the Twins are under new ownership, that they might be more willing to get rid of Joe Ryan or Pablo Lopez, who I believe both have 2 years of team control left. So you would have them up until 2027. Lopez is coming off an injury, so we'll see there. But yeah, those two are intriguing options, but I don't really know past that what the Orioles would do in a trade, because obviously, Mackenzie Gore, Edward Cabrera, the other ones that were out there, Freddie Peralta, they're obviously traded away and on their new teams. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Orioles go. Again, I still see them making a move before February 11th, when pitchers and catchers report, and it's going to be interesting to see who they go with. Like I said, my two most likely are either Gallen or Giolito if they're going to go in the free agency market. Trade wise, I have no idea, because the Shane Baz trade came out of nowhere, and I do like that trade, but the Shane Baz trade came out of nowhere, because it wasn't like they were like, oh yeah, the Orioles are talking to the Rays about Shane Baz potentially coming to the team. It's just like, no, that happened. And like I said, you just got breaking news that we got Blaze Alexander from the Arizona Diamondbacks for Cage Stroud. It says in a pair of minor leaguers, but it doesn't necessarily say who those minor leaguers are. Yeah, it was Cage Stroud. Yeah, 171 ERA and 24 strikeouts in 25 appearances. That was a guy I was hoping we'd keep, but never mind. I guess Diamondbacks did need that for bullpen help, and I guess we kind of did need more help for like backup veteran infielder. But not the news again that I was planning on seeing from the Orioles when we talk about the trade market in this case. But yeah, that's really all I really have to say. I just wanted to hop on here real quick and talk about it, because it's just so weird, because this I'm still saying this Orioles offseason has been good. I'm not gonna sit here and say, because we didn't get Suarez or Valdez or Peralta, whoever, that, oh, this whole offseason all of a sudden is a failure. It was a good offseason. Will it is it does it suck that it's gonna end without having like a true, I don't even want to say number one starter, but because, Gallen you can put in as a number one, and probably, number two if he's not the number one starter. But, it's just like the Orioles had such a fast start to this offseason. It was like, boom, here's Taylor Ward, Pete Alonso, Shane Baz, Ryan Helsley, and all this stuff. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. And now with the starting pitcher market, back when Dylan Cease signed and people were complaining that the Orioles hadn't got a, top of the line starter yet, I said, there's still names on there. Just because Dylan Cease is off the market, that doesn't mean, Suarez and Valdez were still there, along with others on the trade market. But now it's kind of just like the Orioles let it narrow itself down. And again, I was surprised that the Tigers swooped in and took Framber Valdez, considering they were so hesitant to give Scooble $32 million in arbitration, and yet they gave Valdez $38 million. I kind of knew with the spring training starting that Valdez was going to have to take a 3 or 4 year deal at this point, which I don't know if his deal with the Tigers has an opt out after the first and second year, or any opt outs at all. I don't know, but I knew it was going to kind of be a deal like that, and I thought the Orioles can potentially match it. Like I said, we don't really know if they ever had a true offer out there, or if they did, what was their like best offer for Framber Valdez. We don't truly know, because I really think they were more interested in Ranger Suarez. And then when that fell through, they were kind of like, let's just look at Framber and get other guys on the board and see where we go. And even though, yes, I do think that they had intense talks and were interested in Framber, I just don't know if he was their number one choice heading into this season. I still think it was Ranger Suarez for them, because I think they knew that Dylan Cease was going to get overpaid, and that they were kind of like, all right, that's probably not going to happen. And Ranger Suarez was that guy where it's like, yeah, his stuff isn't, great technically, but he makes it work. I mean, he's one of the best left-handed pitchers in the game. And Valdez, there was the whole crossing up his catcher thing, and the end he had the last year where you kind of figured it would slow his market down a little bit, which obviously it did because he signed a week before pitchers and catchers go to spring training. But I just, I thought the Orioles were going to just jump on one of those two. And although we were very close with Ranger Suarez, I was like, okay, Valdez is the guy. I feel like, if we're willing to offer Ranger Suarez 4 years, 120 million, like it said that we put the offer out there, then we could do something for, Framber Valdez in that case. Cause I thought we were just going to do what we did when we pivoted to Pete Alonso at first base. We offered Schwarber the 5 for 150. He took it to Philly. They matched it. He went back there. And when we signed Alonso, we said 5 for 155. We just upped it by 5 million. And I thought maybe, with the 4 year, 120 million offer to Suarez, I thought maybe we would go to Valdez and be like, how about 4 years, 125 million, and maybe an opt out after the second or third year of the deal. So, but I don't even know if we did that. It doesn't seem like we did, but it could have been something that happened because we were willing to do it, pivoting from Schwarber to Alonso. But yeah, like I said, my most likely would probably be Gallen or Giolito going to the O's. I think Giolito might technically be a little bit more likely. Not that the Orioles haven't said that they are willing to give up a draft pick with guys with qualifying offers. I mean, obviously, because they were looking at, I don't know if Suarez had one attached to him, but they were looking at Valdez, and obviously they're looking at Gallen, who has a QO attached to him as well. Giolito does not have that, and I still think you can get him on a 1 or 2 year deal for under 20 million per year. So, I feel like the Orioles are going to go that route, but there's also a possibility that Gallen could sign, but it seems like he wants to stay in the West End, and a possibility of a reunion with the Diamondbacks is possible with him. So, yeah, and like I said, the other guys out there, I think those are just guys that's like, like the Verlander thing. When I read that, I was like, okay, we're in contact with him, but I don't think it's like serious contact like with these other pitchers that we've been talking to, because Verlander's just one of those guys where you look and I don't think, yeah, Mike Elias was there when the Astros traded for Verlander, because wasn't it 2017 when the Astros traded for him? I think it was. So, they have that familiarity with each other. And like I said, Verlander in the second half of the season last year did pitch well. Obviously, he's not like the high strikeout guy that he once was, but he can still pitch effectively. And with Chris Bassett, he's still, effective and pitches well and has a sub 4 ERA and all this stuff. And he can go into the number 4, number 5 spot in the rotation and be a veteran that could teach this team, considering he was just part of a World Series team a year ago. There's options out there for the Orioles. And again, trade market, I have no idea unless the Twins' new ownership is willing to trade Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez, whereas the old ownership was not. And will the Marlins be, because the Marlins have already traded Ryan Weathers and Edward Cabrera. And if they trade away Sandy Alcantara, then they're probably like, okay, well, who would our ace be going into this year? Because, yeah, we have Yuri Perez, but he might not be at that ace status yet. So I don't know if the Marlins would be willing to part ways with Alcantara just yet. I feel like if they keep him, they'll probably see where they're at the trade deadline, which is now August 3rd, and then make that decision. It might be the same with the Twins, where, yeah, they're going to keep Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez on their roster, but depending on where they're at the deadline, like if they're in no way contending at all, then yeah, I think they'll be more willing to part ways with them than they are now going into it, where they say, okay, maybe we think we still have a good roster, so we're going to be competitive and keep that going there. So I really, really think Gallen or Giolito is what the Orioles are going to do, because every time I read articles about the O's talking to those two, it says strongly interested. And with Valdez, you weren't necessarily seeing that. It was just Orioles still have interest or Orioles interested in. But with Gallen and with Giolito, I've seen that the Orioles are strongly considering or are strongly, in talks with those two in particular. So I just think it's going to be one of the G's that we get, Gallen or Giolito. And Gallen is more of the guy who stays healthy, gives you innings and whatnot. Again, I know he had kind of a down year last year, but when you look at how his season finished, it was more like himself. And Giolito actually got the pitch in 26 games last year, make 26 starts, and did it to a 3.41 ERA. Again, his strikeout stuff went down, but that didn't seem to affect him too much. Plus, I saw too, since he was in Boston, he pitched a lot of games in the AL East. I think it was 8 starts in the AL East last year for Giolito, and he had a 3-1 record with a 1.47 ERA. So, I mean, hey, if you can do that in the AL East, then sure, why not? Because you're going to be pitching a lot of games against the AL East teams. And even the Rays, I've mentioned this before, even the Rays, who aren't seen to, be contending this year, are always tough to beat in this division, probably the toughest division in baseball. But yeah, it's basically where it's at with the Orioles at this point, I think. With them missing out on Valdez, they're pivoting, and I'm glad that they actually have backup options, because it seemed like last year when they went with the Morton signing and the Sugano signing, I really think that those were like, okay, we're panicking ourselves into this, whereas this year with Gallon, Giolito, or whatever, I don't feel like it would be a panic move, because even when they still had interest in Suarez and Valdez, they were still talking to these guys and whatnot. So it seems like the Orioles have been invested in looking into it. Whereas last year, like I said, when they signed Charlie Morton and Tomoyuki Sugano, you were just kind of like, what? When were you even interested in these guys? Like, why is this your option? And to be honest, the free agent starting pitching market last year was better, and you could have, brought back Corbin Burns. Granted, he's going through Tommy John surgery right now. Max Fried got overpaid. I know he's a good pitcher, but that was just ridiculous. I mean, nobody came close to what Max Fried got this year in free agency, starting pitching wise. So that's more like a once in a blue moon type of thing for pitchers most of the time. Hitters tend to get those deals more often. But yeah, I'd really like to hear what you guys think. Where will the Orioles go now with the starting pitching market? Because again, they still have a first baseman that they could trade away, whether that be Mayo or Mountcastle, and they still have options in the free agency market. Two guys we know that they are talking to, and I have high interest in. So yeah, and they'll both be cheaper options too. That's the thing too. I don't see the Orioles signing Gallon for more than 3 years, and with Giolito, I can see it being, if not one, a 2-year deal and whatnot. You can get him, but I think Gallon with the draft pick attached to him, and he will probably get more than 20 million per year. Giolito is the cheaper option and no qualifying offer, so you wouldn't have to give up a draft pick. But again, we'll see. There's still 6 days till pitchers and catchers report. And outside of what I just mentioned in this video with the breaking news with the Orioles trading for Blaze Alexander to give them infield depth, I expect the Orioles to make a move for one more starting pitcher before the season starts. Because as much as I do think this rotation is improved from last year, I still think if it's not a top of the line starter, there's still one piece missing, and you still have an opportunity a week before spring training to get that one piece. So yeah, but till then, that's it for me. Stay safe out there, and I will catch you all in the next one.